and also the point of view of the population of the countries which are responsible for the intervention. I think both aspects are equally important. Then the third and last point that I want to make is the absolute need for consistency in the application of norms and standards of international law and practice. That is the minimum and the irreducible condition of credibility. There are no political nuances or degrees of terrorism. Terrorism is terrorism. Terrorism, wherever it occurs, is to be condemned with equal vehemence. It is not possible to have gradations within the spectrum of terrorism. So if you have standards which are obviously not uniform being applied, then there is an insurmountable problem of appealing to the corpus of international law as the source of the intervention. Now, I will just cite one example of this. There have been situations in military history in recent times where governments have had to deal with terrorist groups that mingle with civilian populations. It is by no means a unique situation. It is a situation with which we are all familiar. Now, what are the acceptable limits of government action in those situations where the terrorists have seen to it that they are physically with the civilian population? The purpose obviously is to impose constraints and limitations on the capability of the state to deal effectively in a military sense with the terrorist groups. Now, this situation was encountered in the West Bank and Gaza and was the subject of considerable comment in the report that was prepared by Justice Goldstone. The response to that report was the following. Her Excellency Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State of the United States, in formal testimony before Congress, as I had pointed out earlier, I think it's a very relevant example. That is why I repeat it on this occasion. She said, very rightly, there's no way that one can contradict or refute this observation on the part of the Secretary of State of the United States of America. She said, if these norms which are now being prescribed by Justice Goldstone are to be regarded as binding on governments dealing with terror, then the governments are going to be very seriously handicapped. Because you are stultifying those governments. You are crucially circumscribing the ambit of legitimate action. This point was made very persuasively, with great persuasive power, by the Secretary of State of the United States. And we agree wholeheartedly and unreservedly with that observation by Her Excellency Hillary Clinton. She put it far better than I can, and this was in testimony before Congress. A similar observation was made in equally convincing terms by the British Broadcasting Corporation. So this is a phenomenon of which particular note has been taken by the major countries of the West. They have noted it. This is going to be a very serious constraint if we incorporate that into the body of principles of international law, which are regarded as having force vis-à-vis governments engaged in the struggle against terror. Now, the question which we would like to ask is, how is it possible to refrain from applying this very salutary and indeed self-evident principle to the circumstances which manifested themselves in our own country? If the principle is valid in relation to Gaza and the West Bank, clearly, manifestly, or fortiori, it applies to the situation in Sri Lanka. Because in Sri Lanka, it is not as though by coincidence the civilian population happened to be with the terrorists. Not at all. The terrorists compelled the civilian population at gunpoint. It was not a threat, it was a threat that was carried out. Women and children were shot dead when they tried to escape to government-controlled areas. Now, what does one expect the government of Sri Lanka to do? What would be the right thing to do? If you intervene, and that intervention is now sought to be criticized on the basis of some of the principles that were articulated by Justice Richard Goldstone. If the articulation of those principles is thought to be inimical to the war against terror in the West, then why are those principles sought to be imposed on a smaller country with far more limited resources? Is that right? Is that fair? Is that in the interest of humanity? Is that in the interest of vanquishing the forces of terror in the world at large? And does it reflect a spirit and an attitude that is pervaded by consistency at the very basic level? Now that is the question which, as the foreign minister of this country, I would like to pose to the international community. Now, the reason why I said that this is the proper place to raise some of these concerns in a reflective manner, without emotion. There's far too much emotion in the current debate. We need to be cerebral. It is the discriminating, reflecting mind that must dominate the discourse, not the heart, not the emotions. Now, if we use the reflecting, discriminating mind, and if we try to answer these questions objectively, rationally, and dispassionately, I think the quality of the discourse would be immeasurably improved. Now, I do hope that some of these issues will engage the attention of the exceedingly competent people drawn from different strata of society who will be involved in the deliberations that will take place in this very hall during the next couple of days. The Vice-Chancellor of the Kothalaula Defence University very appropriately emphasized the transformed functions and responsibilities of the armed forces. I would comment that while that is certainly the case, those responsibilities can be discharged with far greater effectiveness if there is systematic training. That is why your current initiatives are so desirable and so timely. We have to sharpen our minds. We have to equip ourselves better. And that means drawing upon the intellectual resources of the Sri Lankan community, and we have abundant intellectual resources. Let us draw in all that talent, that reservoir of experience from the private sector, from the government sector, from civil society. And let us enrich this program, which we have embarked upon. I wish you well. I have no doubt that this initiative will result in very tangible benefits to the Sri Lankan community as we move out of the gloom and the darkness of the last 3 decades into a future that promises to bring hope and redemption to the people of our motherland. I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.